So it's 6:07 p.m. I'm going to call this meeting of the Bloomington Environmental Commission to order on February 18th, 2021. Go through and call the roll. Just give me 2 seconds because I actually have the wrong form up, which is very unlike me. So just in 2 seconds. We'll call roll because we have a new roll. Excellent. Welcome, Don. We're calling roll here right now.
Okay.
We're going down alphabetically by last name. So Matt Caldy.
Present.
Mayor Dickerson is going to be here a little later. Don Eggert.
Here.
Dano Gonzalez. Andrew Gunther, I am here. Shelby Hoshaw is absent tonight. Mike Litwin.
Present.
Dave Parkhurst.
Yep.
Scott Shackelford.
Also present.
Nedamia Whitney.
Here.
You have a quorum, Ms. Reese, so we continue on with the rest of the meeting. Thank you all for being here this evening. We'll go on next to introductions. We'll go just down the same list we just read. So we'll start with Matt Caldy.
My name is Matt Caldy. I've been a commissioner for going on 4 years now. Just a concerned citizen, no SPIA background or anything like that. I am proud to say, though, I haven't missed a meeting since I've been on the commission. So,
Wow, that's impressive.
Didn't know that, actually. That's wow.
That's impressive.
Thank you, Matt. Moving on, Don.
I'm Don Eggert. I'm a retired environmental geologist. I do have a SPIA connection in public administration. This is my start year on the commission. That's about it, I guess.
Don. My name's Andrew Gunther. I'm chair
Yes.
of the commission. Thank you, Don. I was just saying thank you for introducing yourself. My name is Andrew Gunther. I'm chair of the commission. I've been on this commission since 2018. Before that, I served on the Monroe County Environmental Commission and the Bloomington Board of Housing Quality Appeals. I am a graduate of SPIA with a degree in public affairs. I just applied to graduate school last week. So I am in the midst of all that chaos currently. I've served as chair of this commission since 2019. So this is my second plus year of serving as chair. And I love every minute of it. Moving on to Mike Litwin.
Mike Litwin, I'm a retired biologist from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I've been on the Environmental Commission for a long time. And it's great that you're willing to do this, Andrew.
Thank you, Mike. Dave?
Yeah, it might help to say that my undergrad degree was in applied math and my graduate degree was in physiological plant ecology. I came to SPIA in December of 1973. I was appointed to this commission the following year, and I was on it back then for 14 years when our issues were mostly about PCBs from Westinghouse. And then I've been, I taught in the environmental science group at SPIA for about 30 years. I've been back on this commission for several years now. And I guess that's it.
Thank you, Dave. Scott?
Hello again, everybody. It's such a pleasure to join the commission. My background is I'm a law and policy guy. So I have a JD. I practiced for a while in DC in the Bay Area. And I also have a PhD in international relations. So a lot of my work is actually in, well, historically at least, was on sustainable development around the world. More recently, I've been focusing actually more on cybersecurity. The other hat that I wear is I chair the cybersecurity program for the campus. But my first love is still sustainability, frankly. I still teach the sustainability law and policy course for us. I helped to create the sustainable business co-major over at Kelly. And as I said, I have the honor of being the director of the OSHA workshop. And we have a ton of work going on there in environmental, natural resource governance, commons governance, et cetera. So I'm thrilled to be a part. of the Environmental Commission here, and do whatever I can to not only connect on the educational side to resources and students around IU, but also put on any of those other hats where it might be beneficial to us. So thanks again for having me.
Welcome, Scott. We appreciate you volunteering your time. Dedamia.
Hi, I'm Dedamia Whitney. I'm a retired professor of English from Franklin College. But being a small liberal arts school, we all had to wear several hats. So I taught environmental studies for a long time there, which is sort of my entree into the subject. I've been on the EC before, I think 2 terms, and I've been on the Tree Commission for quite a few years. That's about it.
Welcome back, Dedamia.
Thanks.
Moving on to Linda Thompson, the one who holds this all together. You're muted.
Yes, I'm a mute. I am the senior environmental planner in the Planning and Transportation Department. I've been there for close to 17 years now, and I'm the liaison to the for the commission. And my degree is actually in geology, but it didn't take long to start my segue into environmental affairs from working at IDEM and DNR and et cetera. So here I am now being an environmental planner and having a great time with the EC.
As always, thank you, Linda. And then Ben Sheriff.
Hi, everyone. I'm currently a SPIA fellow. I'm a grad student at IU getting my degree in public affairs and environmental science and policy. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I'm currently in North Carolina, but hopefully over the summer I'll make my way to Bloomington for the first time, so I'm excited about that. So I'm excited to meet all the new members, and I'm ready to get started.
And Ben is the intern for our commission, so he does a lot of work on policy and stuff behind the scenes and then brings it to us, and we're very grateful for his work as always. Moving on past introductions, both minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at the January minutes from our last meeting, besides those who are new to the commission?
Yes.
Were there any amendments to be offered?
Mike sent me some comments, but I made them.
Okay.
I move we accept them.
Second.
Excellent. We'll go down again alphabetically. It's moved and seconded. Matt Caldy.
Yes.
John Eggert.
Yes.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Mike Litwin.
Yes.
Dave Parkhurst.
Yes.
Scott Shackelford.
Yes.
Dedamia Whitney.
Well, I'll abstain since I didn't see them and wasn't there for the meeting, so.
Excellent. So it is, the minutes are approved. Thank you all. We'll make sure to get those uploaded onto the city website. We'll move on next to public comment. We have a limit of 5 minutes per person for public comment. If any members of the public wish to speak this evening, they can raise their hand via the chat function or type in the chat if they wish to speak this evening. And as usual, we will wait a minute or two for anyone from the public who might wish to volunteer their time to speak to do so. Seeing anyone, Ben?
Nope.
All right. Seeing no public comment, we'll move on next to our reports from various commissions, starting with Tree Commission.
Okay, well, Dedamia always writes very good minutes for us, but I've got my own notes here. We met yesterday morning, and the meeting started with Chris Niggers, who's one of our former members, just talking about some dead trees in his neighborhood he wanted taken out. But then we talked about 4 city projects that were pretty interesting, I think. Along Jackson Creek, along High Street, and then south of the Goat Farm Park. They're going to put a new trail of the sort that you can ride bikes on safely and that kind of thing. They'll be planting 190 trees south of the park. There'll be a new trail, as I said, along Jackson Creek. And it's from once they get past the park, it'll be from Sherwood Oaks down to Roar Road. And there was lots of talk about 4 bur oaks that are along High Street that people didn't want taken out, but may have to be taken out. The second project was at Discovery Parkway, which is the road that goes off toward the hospital, the new hospital, or if you go to the post office and go straight north there, that's Discovery Parkway. It used to be called Range Road. And they'll need to remove some trees in an island there. And
No, they're gonna leave the island trees.
oh, they are now? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. The third project is at 17th and Dunn. They'll be putting some a turn lane in, and some trees may need to come out. With that, they will make some replacements somewhere. And the fourth one that sounded maybe the major thing was 7th Street protected bike lane, which would cause a few trees to have to be removed. It would go from the Beeline Trail clear onto campus at Woodlawn. And that was most of the meeting. So I'll drop out there.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave on the tree commission report?
Did they give any timelines, Dave, just out of curiosity on, for example, that new trail from, Jackson Creek down to Roar?
I think they said they were gonna start on the north side in the spring, but the south side might have to wait till next year.
Cool. Thanks. I was just curious. We live right there, so I was wondering.
Oh, okay.
Thanks a lot.
I think that's the right project.
That's going to be great.
Excellent. Any other questions for Dave on the tree report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Monroe County Environmental Commission. The Monroe County Environmental Commission did not post their agenda for this month's meeting on their website. And they're not on CATS, so I can't find any footage of the meeting. So I don't know if the meeting was held. And if it was held, I don't know what it was held about. I'll reach out to Nolan Hendon again, who's the chair of the Monroe County Environmental Commission. Last I checked, and ask him about February's meeting. Any questions about that? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability. Don, do you have a report for BCOS this month?
They had a meeting. I don't believe they had a quorum though. They still went ahead and voted on a letter to support the draft to the city council regarding the draft of the 10-year emission document. But most of the actual meeting then got into a discussion of a resolution on housing first and touching on affordable rent, homelessness, and particularly the rising cost of housing in Bloomington. So it was a relatively short meeting. I think what was basically a half hour. I've requested to get 2 minutes, but I still haven't gotten. They haven't sent me any minutes. But one thing, though, I guess that kind of interesting thought to my mind is the discussion of housing and question of environmental justice. I've been kind of wondering whether some of this discussion, their discussion touches a little bit into our issues of particularly environmental justice. So that was basically it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Don, for that report. Does anyone have any questions for Don regarding the Commission on Sustainability report? Seeing none, we'll move on to ERAC. Do we have an ERAC report this month?
Yeah, we met on February 10th, meet every other month. So this time we met February 10th. This is, in case you don't know, the Environmental Resources Advisory Council to the Planning Department.
Parks Department.
Parks, that's what I mean to say. Thank you for correcting me. We talked about the CHAP, which I forget what that stands for, but it's the hunting that goes on in up at Griffey. It's run by, has one person from the White Buffalo group is helping with this, where they bring in hunters who volunteer to hunt there. In 2017, there were sharpshooters from White Buffalo and they got 62 deer. In 2019, they ran this CHAP program and got 26 deer. In 2020, they ran the CHAP program and got 40 deer. So I'll leave that. There are just way too many deer up there eating the ground plants, and so taking out the wildflowers and taking out tree seedlings and so on. So it really needs to get rid of the deer. There are way too many. They talked next about a trail, a pier at Griffey that's going to go out for people to use to fish from. And then there's a loop trail that'll be just under 6 miles. The design is nearly complete. It may affect some wetland, and so they'll have to make up for that somehow. I didn't catch how they were going to do that. Then they mentioned Switchyard Park. The native landscaping there has received something called the Gold Leaf Award, so they were proud of that. Under new business, there's something called the XR app, and they'll be putting onto that a history hike at the Switchyard, so you can get at that from your telephone and your cell phone and look at the history of the railroads and so on at Switchyard Park. Next, they talk about the new power line trail along Duke Power Line that would go from right near the Switchyard Park, and then it would go west from that. And the design of that is underway. Keep talking about lots of trails being built. Then they talked about the how the what's now just unofficially referred to as the Goat Farm Park at the base of High Street, where it curves around and goes on to Winslow. That's going to be renamed the Rogers Family Park. Evidently, they got some money from the Rogers family or something to do that, and they'll be putting in toilets there and parking and so on. And some prairie would be lost, and they'd have to make up for that somehow. Then last year, there was a prescribed burn at Griffey Lake. They burned 8 acres on the north side somewhere. And the idea is to support oak and hickory trees. And they'll probably burn again this spring if the weather cooperates. So that's that.
Thank you, Dave. Do we have any questions for Dave on that very thorough report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Metropolitan Planning Organization Citizens Advisory Committee. Their timeline, I explained this at the last meeting, but I'll explain again. Their timeline has shifted for sending out agendas and their meetings when they hold them. So they send out their agendas now, basically the day after we hold our commission meetings. So I will send that out to you all like I did last month, and I will explain that meeting. I was unable to attend the MPO meeting last month. I was busy with some grad school stuff. So my apologies on that. They did hold their planning organization meeting for this year, election of officers, that sort of thing. And they're working on a coordinated human services public transportation plan. And they're doing a community survey right now, which is included in the agenda that I sent you all last month. And they are working on that. That's their only piece of business for this past month was that survey that they're going to send out to the community. I think it's focused around how to best serve those who need public transportation the most with our current plan. I think it's similar to the route optimization plan, but just more thorough and widespread and not so concentrated on a route specifically. Does anyone have any questions regarding the MPO Citizens Advisory Committee report? Seeing none, we'll move on to Friends of Lake Monroe.
Yeah, what this is about is that Friends of Lake Monroe has a 2-year grant to study the lake and its watershed and to see what problems might be there and then propose how to fix them. And we're at the stage, there are 20 people on the steering committee for that research, and I represent the Environmental Commission on that steering committee. Lots of interesting people from around town and even from Brown County and so on. So it's a pretty good fun to be in. We've started to talk about various inventories that Maggie Sullivan, who is the environmental engineer who's running the process, has been doing. And we're starting to look at data. They're looking for priority areas where phosphorus might be coming in because that causes algal growth that you don't want, and where E. coli might be coming in. Last fall, the group held a blitz, and Don was involved in that. Don Eggert and I and my wife were involved in it too. They went out and looked at, I think there are a total of 140 streams, little ones that flow into bigger ones that flow into bigger ones, and ultimately end up in what I would call the reservoir, Monroe Reservoir, because I use that term for man-made water bodies and like to save lakes for natural ones. But anyway, it's called Lake Monroe, so we'll go with that. And I sent you all, at least not maybe the newest people, but I sent to you an invitation to join the Blitz this spring, which will be on April 2nd. They'll be doing some source sampling from 10 samples of E. coli to try to figure out whether it's coming from humans or what animals it might be coming from. And I guess that was the main set of questions. Somebody asked, there are people doing wakeboarding in Monroe, and I'd never heard of this, but the question is whether that causes a lot of sediment to be brought up and so on. So, oh, there's a second page here, sorry. Turns out that Maggie says this is a very large watershed for the size of the lake. It is the largest lake or reservoir in the state of Indiana. one question is, which is worse for bringing nasty things into the lake? Is it the watershed through creeks, or is it shoreline erosion? So I guess I'll cut out there.
Thank you, Dave. Any?
Yeah, I do. Just as a matter of precision, it actually is called Monroe Lake.
Oh, I know that.
Pardon me?
I know. Oh, Monroe Lake as opposed to Lake Monroe. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay. But it's a reservoir, darn it.
Yeah, that's why the lake comes separate second.
I see.
Like Griffey Lake is a reservoir. If it was a natural lake, it would be called Lake something or other.
I see. Okay. And what about Lemon?
Never heard that.
Actually, I don't know about Lake Lemon because I always have, just like Lake Monroe, I've always heard it called Lake Lemon.
Yeah.
But it's probably a reservoir also.
I think it is. I'm not 100% certain, but I feel like I read about it.
Yeah,
So
I
how
haven't
does this
heard it called Lemon Lake.
So how does this go again, Linda? If it's a natural occurrence, it's called lake something?
If it's a reservoir, it's name and then lake.
Okay. Cool.
I'd never heard that one.
That's cool.
Of course, I came from.
I just made it up, Dave.
Did you really?
No.
Okay.
I came from Iowa and often went to Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, and I think those were real lakes. So.
Well, it's not a competition in the Midwest here, Dave. Any questions for Dave further on the report for Friends of Lake Monroe?
No, it sounds like an interesting meeting, though.
All right, moving on to.
I've been graphing a lot of the data. I've been years since I used the R statistics software, and I'm going back and learning again how to use it to make graphs of the data. So that's been, since I can't be gardening right now, that's taking up a lot of my time.
Good.
Excellent. Moving on to Monroe County, Identify and Reduce Invasive Species, also known as MC Iris. Do we have a report from them this month, Don?
Yes, we met online as usual Tuesday. A lot of this meeting actually focused on again this year's joint MC Iris and city target plant is the purple winter creeper. And I can't pronounce the genus that it belongs to, but it's the target plant for the year to eradicate that. But most of the meeting broke into the activity that we've established with the Sycamore Knolls Homeowners Association with city parks. And this Saturday will be the 5th meeting of this group of volunteers, and we're focused on removing the invasive plants from Southeast Park. And it's been very surprisingly successful. I'm very pleased with the turnout, including the fact that the last several weeks, the weather was not exactly very ideal for being out in the woods. We are going to meet again this Saturday, so it'll be the 5th meeting. And again, it seems to me it's going to fits very nicely what we're going to talk about later on with the, if we get to it, the conductivity, wildlife conductivity corridor. And if we can get other homeowners to join in with this, with city parks, I think we're going to have some very productive work as far as trying to remove the invasive plants and therefore making room for the native plants to move back in. and also keep the invasives from spreading out of the city into the surrounding areas as well. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Don. Any questions for Don on the report from MC Iris? Seeing none, we'll move on from our reports from various commissions and move on to our working groups. This is a B-cycle month. So we'll start with ECPC, which stands for the Environmental Commission Planning Committee / Plan Commission. Linda, do you have anything for us this month?
I don't. We actually don't have any petitions for the March Plan Commission agenda. The only thing on the agenda so far is are the changes in the UDO. So I have no new cases to report about tonight.
And the McDole property, which I had spoken against on behalf of the commission, because we issued a recommendation of denial for that property, has not yet been scheduled for the city council. Once it is scheduled for the city council, I'll let you know when to expect that meeting to come up. But I plan on speaking at that meeting against that property due to the amount of impervious surface they offer versus what the UDO requires. So keep an eye out for that in the future. I'll let you know once it's scheduled. They are currently working. They just finished Village Century last night. So there are a couple petitions slotted behind, and it might get bumped due to, I'd imagine, a very full schedule with the upcoming rezoning maps. So I'll keep an eye out on that and see when it comes up for you guys. Any questions on ECPC or the Plan Commission?
Is that McDowell project site, is that the same place that they're using the temporary winter shelter right now?
No, I think that the temporary winter shelter is at what's called the warehouse.
Oh, well, they're both warehouses, but I get.
Right.
But not the big warehouse that's down by Swiss Yard Park. It's a different warehouse.
Okay, this is the one that's got the juvenile or the youth facilities in it. All right.
Yeah, it used to be a gym most recently. It was the Indiana CrossFit, I think.
Okay.
That's where the shelter is.
Yeah, that's where it's at.
And that's not the one, we're talking about a lowercase warehouse that's just to the north of that.
A lot of warehouses. Any further questions on ECPC / Plan Commission? Seeing none, we'll move on to our Biodiversity Working Group. The Biodiversity Working Group hasn't really had a chance to meet since it's been reestablished. We just reestablished it last week in an attempt to get the habitat connectivity project that Ben has worked on amended for approval this evening. I haven't had a chance to read over it yet. It was rather last minute when we assigned it. And I haven't seen any comments from any of the other members, which were Dave and Mike. So
Mike sent me some comments, but that's it.
That's it? Okay. So I don't know if we're ready to submit that for approval this evening. If anyone else disagrees, I'm open to doing it this evening. I just haven't had a chance to read over it, so I don't want to be the one to initiate that.
Yeah, I think more eyes on it, the better. So let's wait.
We'll wait until next month for the last item under new business then. But the Biodiversity Working Group is open to any members who wish to join, focusing obviously on issues relating to biodiversity, habitat connectivity, that sort of thing. Our working groups, we're just getting them reestablished this year. We're gonna have a conversation about that in the coming months. But we encourage all members who want to get involved with either the ECPC or biodiversity or another working group to just jump on in and email one of us and get involved. Moving on to old business, we have the draft climate action plan discussion from last month that we are unable to finish. Ben, do you have that list of amendments that we were working on last month?
Yeah, it's basically what I have is just from the previous month's minutes is what I wrote on it. So in that section of it. So if you guys want to pull it up, or I can pull it up too as well.
Okay, I can pull it up. My question was, what section did we stop at last month? We finished with waste. So after waste comes water and wastewater. So were there any comments relating to or amendments relating to water and wastewater section of the draft climate action plan? Do you have anything, Don? I know you volunteered to read that section.
I'm just opening my notes.
Perfect. We can wait a minute.
I guess one of the first things I just comment, I sent these to Linda and to Lauren. On page 5, one of my notes was the idea of establishing a plan to collect rainwater and graywater to facilitate protection of trees in drought. That seemed a good idea. In the whole section, I just sort of summarized by saying the equity section is cannot be overestimated. And particularly pointing out the fact that flooding disaster, low-income citizens are the usual victims, much more so than, and they don't have the insurance. One of the things about energy requirements for the wastewater and water treatment plant question I raised didn't seem to specifically suggest things like solar or wind to supplement to replace their using of electricity. And the idea, I support the idea that the city look into producing gas out of the wastewater treatment plant. Made a note that to the fact that Cummins has a track record in power generation from waste gases. Flash flooding seemed to be something that really needs to be addressed. And again, the utilities department's adopt the drain program seems like a good fit there. Also, one of the problems I did find on W4 section, I suggest using the term rain garden instead of the kind of a strange wordage that they used in the document at that point. And what can you do? Portion that's in others. There's no place in there. They also said about pet waste. Pick it up and throw it away, I guess. But pet waste can be used in mulching and soil supplement for flower gardens. Versus putting it into the waste stream, and can help move away from chemical-based fertilizers. So that was my comments on that section.
Thank you, Don. I had one comment as well under goal W4, mitigating flood hazards and impacts. They mention how we need to promote native landscaping, restore and conserve habitat, encourage rain gardens on private property, avoid turf grass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they mention how the more permeable the surface, the less stormwater runoff there'll be, reducing flood risks. But at no point do they recommend preserving or increasing green space within the city. So I would comment that they should include permeable surfaces on the underneath the goals, with the goal of either maintaining or increasing the amount within the city currently. I would obviously favor increasing the amount, considering we lost over 2,000 acres since 1991 of green space within the city. So I think increasing it whenever possible is a noteworthy goal. So that's my main comment on this section is they don't focus enough on green space when it comes to flooding
I
mitigation.
think I think your point on the permeability, I mean, that seems to come up so often in reviewing plans and projects. Yes, I think you hit something that really needs to be emphasized there.
And green space is one of my passions. So I'm hopeful they can make that into the final draft. Did anyone else have anything for the water and wastewater sections of the draft climate action plan? I had a question that's not so much a comment when it came to their goals relating to drinking water quality and the treating and transport of water and wastewater. They want to reduce energy use associated with the treating and transporting, I'm so sorry, of wastewater and water by 10% by 2030. And I was wondering how that squared up with previous city plans regarding reducing emissions. So I know we had the Bloomington Environmental Action Plan that we put out. I know the city has other plans as well. I just don't know how their current goals stack up against previous plans, because if they're introducing 10% and a previous plan that we've committed to said 20% or 15%, I'd rather stick to the previous plan than the less strict new plan. So that's a question I have for further research. I have to dig into those plans that I talked about, but I didn't know if maybe Linda, you knew off the top of your head about.
I don't. I have not looked at that.
Okay, that's just a question that I have that I'll be looking into as well. But if anyone has any idea, I'd appreciate some direction on that. All right, any further questions, comments, amendments for water and wastewater?
Well, is our purpose tonight to come up with specific recommendations that we as a group are going to make to Lauren Travis, or what? What is our actual purpose?
So the goal tonight is to gather all the comments and ideas that members have created on their own and compile them into a list. And then how I envision it going is that we would take that list and we would, as a commission, determine whether or not we have specific proposals for the comments and ideas that came up under that list. So for example, with mine relating to impervious surface and permeable surfaces, we would then work forward on drafting either specific language, or if we just agree that it's fine as a generic comment, figure out a way to word the generic comment, and then we would compile those onto a list and send them to Lauren Travis and say, these are all the EC's comments to the draft climate action plan. We hope to see them introduced into the final draft, and then go from there. But I am open, as always, to any suggestions otherwise of how to do this process, because there's always a better way, I find. But if I see no further comments or questions, we'll move on to our next section, which is green space. Did anyone have any? We had quite a few people read green space. Did we have any comments, Dave?
Yeah, I may have said this last time, but I'm a compulsive editor, and I once taught a course in technical writing. And if the person who wrote this green space thing had taken that course, they would not have passed. It's just awfully written. And I sent a 4-page set of edits to Lauren Travis, most of which are not major points, but just I sort of rewrote that chapter. There's one thing in it that I think we ought to specifically say, however. This would go in paragraph G1-B-1. I would suggest that we integrate knowledge of the extensive document the Bloomington Environmental Commission has produced in the past with pollination and wildlife corridors. And if we're redoing that, okay, but that ought to be referred to in this plan.
That was one of my big comments as well. Was that didn't really cite to any of the habitat connectivity work that's already been done. But then I found it funny is they introduced maps, for example, the map on page 8-4, where they lay out heat island impacts in Bloomington. And the heat island impact map very well lines up with the habitat connectivity plan map that I saw that Ben sent out earlier. So I think that we should let them know that they should cite to that as well, because it has valuable info that they could use.
Yeah, well, a good place for habitat corridors is in paragraph G1-B-1. It's a specific place. I don't have the thing in front of me at the moment, but that's what my note says.
Yeah, that's where it is.
It says enhance the connectivity of green belts and habitat corridors across the community, including identification and improvement of pollinator corridors and wildlife corridors.
Yeah, so we should tell them that we've been looking into that and we have some information for them.
One general thing in my notes is, and I guess is just basically is the fact I'm active with MC Iris, and the issue of invasive plants does not seem to be. I'm very disappointed in the lack of comment and discussion of their significance, because if you're going to protect native plants and animals, you have to be looking out for things that are out competing them. And if you have corridors, you really have to be careful about what's in one of those corridors that can either bring stuff from the outside into Bloomington, or problems in Bloomington, we can exit Bloomington into the surrounding environment. That seemed to be the persistent thing that I've seen here. And also one point was seen, I think it's G3A and B, the importance of diversity as an underlying. Shortly before I was an undergraduate there, Dutch elm disease wiped out the quadrangles, very mature American elms. And I've seen in the Chicago suburbs where much of my wife's family lives, how the promoted ash trees in much of the Orland Park. And basically now you have almost a treeless suburb Chicago because they planted so many bloody ash trees and didn't have a very much diversity. And my paleobotany colleague at the University of Illinois was dumbfounded by the fact that when they replaced the trees on the quadrangle in Illinois, they again went with basically a monoculture. And again, there could be more added to what you can do. Again, part of my stress is getting the community has to be involved, and particularly again is people need to be able to remove and identify after the invasive plants in their own property. This is counterproductive to have extensive invasive plants in the community if we're concerned about preserving the native biodiversity.
All right, I had another one as well. Under G4, the goal G4, reduce stormwater and microheat island impacts. They have two strategies, reducing impervious surface and increasing water uptake capacity of green space. Again, they never really mention increasing green space. They have strategies involving ways to protect soil from impacting during construction, but they don't have any mention of actually increasing current green space goals within Bloomington, as well as under reduced impervious surfaces. They only mention impervious surfaces as they relate to streets. So they mention creating a green streets policy or a living streets policy, but they make no mention of impervious surface in any sort of development. Which I think if you're only focusing on streets and not focusing on what the streets connect each other to, you're kind of missing the point when it comes to reducing impervious surface within Bloomington. Just how I see that. So I think expanding beyond streets is a smart strategy for the city to go forward, and I think that should make it in the final draft as well.
I had 4 comments that I sent you by email, and 3 of them were kind of about organization and syntax, like Dave mentioned. But one substantive one was on the introduction page where they talk about impervious surfaces. I suggested they should mention that increasing impervious surfaces negatively affects stormwater runoff and the natural water cycle, which is mentioned at other points in the document, but not in the introduction.
One of the things also I noticed is they use the term rain garden here, whereas in the previous section, they used a different, the idea of having consistent terminology and also terminology. I'm more familiar with the concept of rain garden than I was with the what had been me in the earlier section. You know, if you're going to, one should be consistent throughout the whole document.
Don, you keep blanking out, and it's kind of hard to follow when that happens.
Sorry. I'm in the basement and my Wi-Fi is not very good.
Understandable. I had another kind of nitpicky one, which is under goal G2, increasing quantity and quality of climate adaptive native habitats. Again, they mention installing roadside climate adaptive native vegetation that to create effective barriers to prevent drifting of air pollutants to adjacent schools and residences and parks. But I don't see anything about planting native vegetation, requiring native vegetation in any private development as well. I don't know if that's something we're preempted on at the state level to not allow restricted that far, but I know that it's a goal of mine to make sure that private developers stop using whatever they're selling at Lowe's for landscaping and actually focus on native habitats as much as humanly possible. Matt?
Yeah, so on that same point, I had a note on that one. The install roadside climate native vegetation. I read that whole article and study that they attached, and it doesn't seem very relevant to here at all. This might be another case of one of those they just took from another city. It seems like a really big thing to do next to, I guess, next to an interstate, but we don't have a lot of places where 37 like butts right up against a school ground, or it also was very specific about needing to be at least 15 feet tall with no gaps. So it's like specifically really long-term planning where you'd have, I don't know, pine trees or something with 0 gaps between them, at least a certain height. Any less than that is either inadequate or potentially worse than having nothing there. So I thought it was really weird that that was their first point of action in that one. Because if you looked, and I know this is jumping, but if you went to the implementation, they had that as the #1 priority. Their #2 priority was increase use of no-mow areas or low-mow areas. And I think that one's far more important and useful. And then after that, with their third priority, they said promote landscaping for absorption practices so that water-prone residential and commercial landscapes end up with native moisture-tolerant perennial plantings and shrubs. I would also say that one was more important than the one they featured above both of those in the section.
Rereading, did anyone have any comments on goal G1, which was increasing quantity and quality of green space within the community? I again had questions about how that connected to our habitat connectivity plan, as well as, again, previous goals relating to connectivity within Bloomington. Because I know we've had connectivity plans before, and I don't know how big an impact or how big a factor green space has been in the creation of those plans. But I would again be interested in seeing, and this isn't even a comment, this is just a wish of mine. I would wish to see how much we've improved since we've in the past made these goals. Because I know a lot of these goals I keep seeing in this document don't necessarily seem to be new. They seem to be continued goals, which is fine. But I just want to see progress on those goals as well. I would love to see, since 2010, Bloomington's increased green space by X percent. Our goal is to increase by X percent more by 2030. I just find numbers backed goals to be a little more effective and a little more easier to create benchmarks for, if that makes sense.
Some of their suggested actions are for studies that would probably give you some of those numbers of what's actually happened. I don't know if that data exists yet, but some of their suggested actions in a number of the green space sections are about measuring tree canopy, measuring green space, and having it provide more insight into everything from heat island to, I don't know. It's a lot of good stuff, but I don't think we have the answers you're looking for yet. I wish we did.
I'm always wishing for more data. That's one of my fatal flaws. I'm always like, I wish we had more data. Dave.
One of my comments on the green space section that I sent to Lauren reads like this. The fifth paragraph on page 8.3 doesn't make sense because it says the possible tree canopy is less than the existing tree canopy. Maybe 27% is supposed to be the possible additional canopy, but then the maximum under current development conditions would seem to be 38 plus 27, which if I remember my third grade edition comes to 65%, not 61%. And then 38 plus 22 doesn't add to 61 either. So their math there is all screwed up. I don't know. But since Lauren will now have that and suggest to them they probably fix it, I don't think we need to say anything.
I mentioned that one also.
Excellent. Do we have any further comments, questions, concerns, amendments to the green space section of the draft climate action plan? Matt?
Yeah, I have another kind of complicated one. In G3B1, they were saying their initial action was to explore development of additional incentives for tree planting, particularly in targeted areas within the city as established by the citywide ground cover and heat island assessment, which is something they said earlier in the section that they wanted to conduct. And I'm all for incentives for tree planting as someone who's trying to do a lot of tree planting myself. Incentives would be great, but I think they got their priorities a little differently than I would have done it, because again, in implementation, they had, sorry, I gotta find it real quick. Their next point was to develop educational and informal resources, providing information on beneficial and climate adaptive tree species, a whole bunch of other great stuff. I again think they have their order messed up. I think the first priority should be the educational resources prior to the incentives, because a lot of people, I think, would do things if they knew what to do and why to do it. So I just think they have their priorities a little backwards.
Mhm.
Excellent. Any further comments on green space?
Well, just one last one I didn't think about in my notes, but I should have, is that taking care of the trees and green space that we have should be something, some footage of that the opinion piece that was in the Guardian a couple months ago about you have to do more than just plant trees. If you're going to have green space, you have to have plans for how to keep the stuff green and alive, how to keep pests out, how to help the plants through droughts and other events.
Protect them from deer.
Yeah, yes, deer. I counted six or seven deer yesterday in my neighbor's yard. They were browsing on some of the trees. Obviously, they're hungry.
Do you have another comment on green space, Don?
No.
Any further comments on green space before we move on to health and safety? Good comments on green space, everyone. Thank you. We'll move on to health and safety. I know this is one of our lighter ones. Does anybody have any comments or amendments for the health and safety sections?
Hold on a second. Let me open my notes. Sorry.
Fine.
Health and safety. Part of this, again, this comes from my experience with Evansville and natural hazards mitigation. The need, if you're going to have a mutual, definitely have to be clearly spelled out mutual aid agreement in 7.7 HS2-B, and also not just have an agreement, but also have training exercises and simulations of events. So you need more plans. Weird.
Sorry, my cat was fighting with my other cat. Excellent. Do we have any other comments on health and safety? Thank you, John.
Again, one of the things I've looked at and what you can do, there's no mention of volunteering. You can become an American Red Cross Disaster Service volunteer, National Weather Service Storm Spotter, Indiana Home Security FEMA volunteer. Anyhow, there's a bunch of suggestions there as far as and thinking of what Texas is going through currently, things like what to do when a disaster strikes, etc. So there's a whole bunch of bullet points they could download probably from FEMA's website or from American Red Cross to have a family disaster plan, and Indiana Department of Homeland Security all would have some things that could beef up that section as far as what you can do or should do.
I didn't have many comments on this one, really at all. They keep referring to us as the University of Indiana, which annoys me a little bit. Yeah, that's how you know it was written by consultants. It's
There's one place where they talk about Bloomington County too.
Bloomington County. Don't let the county commissioners see that. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I didn't have any comments on this.
Ellettsville.
Did anyone else have any comments on health and safety? Seeing none, we'll move on. That was the one we had the least interest in. We'll move on to then climate economy. Did anyone have any comments or amendments for the climate economy section of the draft climate action plan? I'm going back over the notes to see what I have.
Oh, climate economy. Let's see if I have this thing. Oh yeah, that's one thing. One observation, and I was kind of wordy in my comment. Basically, one of the things that think in terms of sustainable communities. This again comes out of earthquake-related situations, but business insurance more than in business interruption riders would be something that could be suggested for people to in the business sectors, particularly the small businesses, obviously, but it's it's one little thing that they could do, people could do to protect themselves as far as protecting the economy and jobs.
I don't know if I'm correct in thinking this. I might be completely off base. But one of their strategies for mitigating the impacts of climate change is to develop new financing pathways by adopting a resilience penny property tax and a carbon impact fee, which would, from what I can see, just be another tax. But I could have sworn, and Linda, you may be the one to ask, I could have sworn that we were preempted by the state to create taxes relating to things relating to climate change. I could have sworn that we were not allowed to impose additional taxes outside of the income tax and that sort of thing. Because they're talking about introducing a new stream entirely outside of the income tax.
I don't recall if there was something, a preemptive rule on environmental rules.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
That's the problem. Is I don't know what we've been preempted against and what we haven't been.
Well,
Just assume we have if you don't know.
Right, because they've done it on a lot of individual things, but I don't know if it's an across the board rule.
Okay, well then my comment would be that if it was implemented, I think we'd not be allowed to do it very quickly. I think they should focus more on leveraging existing financial pathways, current bonds, reducing costs through a sustainable technology so that you can reinvest into other areas of climate resilience. Designating, they have one, establish a policy that designates city electric and natural gas franchise fee incomes as a funding source for climate initiatives. I think that's a great idea. But I think those are things that are much less likely to either be preempted or already have been preempted than establishing new taxes and fees for the purpose of climate change mitigation. Now, I'm not saying I'm against implementing new taxes or fees for climate change mitigation. I'm just saying I know the state's not very happy with that idea. And I can tell you that I would imagine a fight on it. So I think focusing on existing pathways might be a wiser pathway forward than looking at new ways to raise fees. But that's just my gut political instinct coming into play. Just going through my notes again real fast. I didn't really have too much on this section. A lot of it is just tying into cooperation between stakeholders. So that a lot of it is, cooperate with Ivy Tech to establish this program, cooperate with IU to establish this program, cooperate with the county to establish this program. It's not a lot of scientific policies like increasing green space or reducing tree canopy or increasing tree canopy or reducing greenhouse emissions. It's a lot of it's just statements of planned cooperation between different entities. That was my impression. Did anyone else have any comments relating to the climate economy section? Okay. Seeing none, we have survived the draft climate action plan. I think what we should do.
You've left out food and agriculture, and you've left out chapter 12. So.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong list.
Food and agriculture is 6, right?
We have local food, which we went over last meeting.
Oh, we did. Okay.
And then what was the other section you mentioned?
Well, section 12, the final things.
Oh, the implementation recommendations?
Yeah, so on page 12.3, they talk about groups that ought to be added to provide information. And I suggest that we add the city's environmental commission, the tree commission, and the Environmental Resources Advisory Council to their list of 1 or 2 groups that ought to be consulted. It might have been the Sustainability Commission and 1 other group, but why leave out the Environmental Commission? Why leave out the Tree Commission? And why leave out ERAC? So those ought to be added.
Yeah, for this section, I mostly just had all the comments I had previously transferred to this one because this is just the goals broken down into individual sections.
Okay, well, what I just said was something that I included in a note that I sent to Lauren Travis. So
okay.
She's already heard that idea. One more comment on the food and agriculture, though. How stupid it is to put white text in a yellow background. It's just practically unreadable. And did they even look at it themselves? Well, they knew what it said, so it didn't matter, right? I mean, geez.
Does Lauren Travis know about that as well? I'm sure she does. All right, so what I would recommend is I would volunteer, work with Ben to compile a list of all the amendments that have been offered at this meeting and last. Word those amendments in a way that would be satisfactory to the commission. Send those amendments out to the commission for any final amendments or changes, and then send that letter as soon as possible to Lauren Travis. I don't think it needs to come up for a vote at our next meeting because we've all independently submitted these amendments. So we know what they are. So it's not a surprise. It's just working on the final wording, which should not be controversial. So we'll do that via email and then try to get that to Lauren as soon as possible. Linda has told me that a new draft has come out for the climate action plan. But since we did not submit these comments, it's very unlikely that any changes have been made that we have commented, I would just say. So our specific comments, for example, about putting the EC in, I doubt anyone else has made that comment besides us.
But I already wrote, I did write that to Lauren, so.
Well, other comments as well. I don't think we run a big risk of duplicate comments from other people being submitted that are the same as what we are. So I think we should still submit this as soon as possible, and then they can do the work of going back through their draft and seeing if they've made any of those changes already. That way we don't have to spend another meeting going over this.
Is the new draft available to us? I'd like to see whether my suggestions got put into it.
I don't think it's out to the public yet.
Okay.
Yeah, and if everyone could just send me their comments so I can find it in the climate action plan as well, like where these comments should be put, that would be great as well. If it's easy.
Yeah, so everyone who submitted comments, if you have them in writing, send them to Ben. Anything that we don't have in writing, I can go back, or Ben can go back, or we can both go back and rewatch our meeting and just see what we missed. And then we can incorporate all that into the draft. Ben, what do you?
I was just going to say I have most of what all the comments are. I just don't have the location on where to find them. So that's like kind of the only thing I need. Yeah. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So if you have the information, so page numbers, that sort of thing, that would help Ben and I out a lot. But I think we do need to take a vote at this meeting for the process. So I would entertain a motion to approve these amendments via email after they've been finalized in wording. And then submit those after that to Lauren Travis.
Linda, is that acceptable?
You mean the process of doing this via email?
Voting on it by email?
Well, we can't have a regular vote via email.
No, so what I was anticipating was this vote would basically be entrusting Ben and myself to compile all the amendments into a document and then submit that document to Lauren Travis once we send it to you guys to make sure that we didn't word anything incorrectly or get any page numbers wrong.
I think that's acceptable. We've certainly done it before.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to have Ben and I finalize these amendments into a final draft and then submit that to you guys for approval. And then pending that approval, submit to Lauren Travis, hopefully within the next week or two. Do I have a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we'll go down the list. Alphabetical order, Matt Caldy,
Yes.
Meredith Dickerson,
Yes.
Don Eggert,
Yes.
myself, I vote yes. Mike Litwin,
Yes.
Dave Parkhurst,
Okay.
Scott Shackelford,
Yes.
and Dedamia Whitney.
Yes.
All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you all for all your work on reading the draft climate action plan. I know it's not the best bedtime reading, but I appreciate you all taking the time to do that. And we'll try to get that draft to you within the next week or so. Moving on to new business, our first order of business is election of the 2021 officers for the EC. Our slate committee, which was charged with collecting nominations, soliciting nominations, has their slate ready to present. The slate committee this year was Matt Caldy, Mike Litwin, and Dave Parkhurst. Do one of you want to report the slate for this year?
Yeah, I can do that. We had only one candidate for each office, and that was Andrew has agreed to run again for chair. Matt would run for vice chair, and Dave Parkhurst for secretary treasurer. In view of the fact that we only had one candidate for each office, Andrew, are you comfortable with presiding over the election, the vote for that?
I am, but I do have to, before we proceed, have to offer the opportunity for anyone to make a nomination from the floor per our bylaws. So are there any nominations from the floor for any of the 3 offices up for election? Again, those are secretary, treasurer, vice chair, and chair. Seeing no nominations from the floor, I would accept a motion to approve the slate of officers by acclamation.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Instead of doing acclamation, actually, since we can't do acclamation per the governor's rules, we'll go down the list and do just an up and down vote for the entire slate through roll call. Matt Caldy,
Yes.
Meredith Dickerson, Meredith.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I thought I unmuted.
No, you're fine. Don,
Yes.
I vote yes. Shelby is not here. Sorry. Mike,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
and Dedamia.
Yes.
Excellent. Again, it is unanimous. Thank you all. Thank you to Matt and Dave for being willing to serve as vice chair and secretary treasurer. I look forward to working with you both as we lead the EC through 2021. We'll move on then to our next piece of new business, which is the 2021 projects and bucket list. So we do what we call a bucket list meeting, usually in January. This year got shifted. The bucket list meeting is where we each come to the EC with an idea in mind of a project that we want the EC to undertake that year, big or small. And the general theme is, what would you like to see done by the EC by the time that you leave the EC? And it can be anything big to anything, some people wanted, last year wanted to do columns for the HT. That's something we did. Mine last year or the year before was to submit amendments to the UDO. We did that. So it can be a multi-month long to a year-long process. It can be just a single meeting, something you want to get out of the way real fast. I'll start with mine. I kind of have 2, a big one and a slightly smaller one. The slightly smaller one is, I think it would be a great idea. And Ben, could you take notes on these while we go down and get everyone's ideas?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure before I started. I was going through the ordinance for the Environmental Commission, and I noticed that we are also charged specifically, in addition to reviewing Plan Commission proposals and Plan Commission projects, we are also charged with doing the same thing for the Board of Public Works. So I'd be interested, as a small thing, just trying to keep more up to date on what the Board of Public Works is doing, since we are charged statutorily with overseeing them a little bit. I think that would be an interesting foray into a new aspect of city government we haven't done before, but that we are intended to be doing. And then my second big one is to update the Bloomington Environmental Action Plan. We did the Bloomington Environmental Action Plan before I was on the commission. I believe it was it 2016 or 2017, Linda?
I'm not sure, but do you mean the action plan or do you mean Becky?
The action plan, I'm sorry, the BEEP.
Okay, you mean the BEEP and not the Becky?
Yes, the BEEP, not the Becky.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say the Becky. Okay, sorry.
I was talking about the BEEP because so the Bloomington Environmental Action detailed how Bloomington can reduce environmental greenhouse gas emissions to 17% below 2014 levels by 2020. It's 2021. I think it's time to update that plan a bit. And I would love for us to start that process. It could take a couple years. It could be a multi-year long process. But I think updating that plan would keep the EC current, as well as issue another important plan by the EC on greenhouse gas emissions within Bloomington. So those are my two proposals for this upcoming year. And I'm not going to go down a list. I'm just going to open the floor to anyone else who wants to propose an idea that they may have. But I will call on someone if I have to.
Well, I'll jump in here. Mine was to actually update the Bloomington environmental quality indicators. We haven't done that in a number of years, and we are required to do that by statute. To research and provide information on how Bloomington's environment is doing. And we haven't really touched that in a number of years. So that's why it's the Becky, Bloomington Environmental Quality Indicators, that I was thinking of.
Okay.
What could you give examples of the indicators?
Well, there's water, there's, I don't have the document in front of me right now, but there's toxic materials, there's
Air quality.
All the basic environmental sectors that you would think of.
And was last updated in 2011, it looks like.
Yeah, I was just looking it over, and there's a lot of out-of-date information on it, like from like the 1990s. So it definitely could be updated for sure.
That's a good one. Thank you, Linda. Who wants to share next? No idea is too small.
Okay, I have a small idea. When I was reading on the implementation page from the Climate Action Plan draft, the promote use of no-mow areas, I read a lot about that as a result, and I don't think that whoever drafted it really knew what they were talking about, because they were talking about planting with appropriate heights, and basically no-mow areas are to promote returning an area to nature. Like eventually it's going to turn into whatever it was going to be, a prairie or a woods or whatever it was. But while I was doing that research, I learned a lot more about low mow areas, where you mow once in the spring and once in the fall, essentially in an area of a property, so that the grasses get taller, because there are a lot of birds, a lot of insects, just a lot of nature that benefits from that. The birds that nest in the tall grasses that otherwise have seriously shrinking habitats. So one of my thoughts was seeing if there were any city properties where they could do sections of low mow, and seeing if we could encourage it for churches, schools, anyone else, even if that was just through putting together a pamphlet.
That's a great one.
Actually, on that, there is a sign on the north side of Southeast Park along Moores Pike that has fallen over, but it says this is a low mow area specifically.
Oh, that's awesome. I've seen one up, or one or two up around the baseball stadiums in IU. So I think some places are kind of doing it, but I'd like to see more of it personally.
This is a really small one, Andrew. But we every year do a service learning project with the Ostrom Fellows. And I think it'd be really fun to work with the commission to find, an appropriate one that they could dig their teeth into over an academic year and come up with a like a sustainability report. Perhaps we did one for just City Hall. Gosh, this was like 7 years ago. I'll put up a link in the chat box here. So we wouldn't have to take that as gospel or anything, but it's a lot of brain power. And, there are folks that are really, frankly, keen on a lot of these issues that we're discussing. So I'd love to just, have a bit of a dialogue going, and we have time. This wouldn't start till the fall, but craft something that they could really help out with, and maybe something that's been sitting on the shelf for us for a while too.
I'm just looking over what you sent us. It's very thorough.
Yeah, this was from a sustainability course, that I taught a few years ago. But they did a great job, and I don't think this has been updated either since 2013. So we could just go back and update this, or do it for other, properties from the city.
This is well done. Nice. No white text and yellow boxes, Dave. Excellent. Thank you, Scott. That's a good one.
That's a start anyway.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything they want to throw on the pile for our 2021 planning committee or planning meeting? All over the place.
One thing I guess I really would like to look into would be to get some idea, because it's so many countries are talking about using basically the Green New Deal as part of their recovery program, and get some idea with just how well insulated, how efficiency, trying to get some parameters, some form of metric to look at different types of how our buildings to measure their weatherization, their in essence efficiency and usage. Because if funds will, we have to assess some form of how big the problem, how many buildings have, roughly how many to bring up to something closer to present energy standards. Some actual idea of how big the problem might be.
Sorry, I was muted that entire time. I'm so sorry. Excellent. Thank you, Don, for that. That's a good one as well. Lots of good ideas this year. I'm very appreciative. Do we have any other comments from anybody or ideas, I should say? Matt?
I have another one. This one I kind of outsourced. A friend of mine who's applying and trying to get on the commission, but since he hasn't up until now, I'll share his idea. He works for a company that does a lot of removal of invasives and planting of natives. And he mentioned that a lot of shared property boundaries, particularly rental properties, have just turned into kind of invasive thickets. He was hoping that there could be a grant or a program or something from the city that would incentivize landlords to remove these thickets and replace them with natives. And he thought it'd be really great if Bloomington crews and or just local contractors could do a lot of the work. I'm not sure exactly how this would come together, but I thought it sounded good. So I wanted to push that forwards for him.
He would certainly get support from MC Iris.
Yeah, because I find landlords, having worked for multiple, tend to use the most price efficient landscaping materials, which almost never means native. It usually means the most invasive species they possibly can, because they grow fast and cheap.
Well, a lot of those are becoming illegal to sell in the States, so happily.
Happily, indeed. Any?
Unfortunately, the big box stores don't seem to follow the state laws. And they can also buy on the internet.
Yeah, that's true. Any further ideas to add to the list? Going once, going twice, sold. So now I think we should go what we traditionally do, and Linda, I would love your idea on this. What we traditionally do is we then take a straw poll vote on which items people would most like to do over the next year. I'm just not sure how best to do that in this format.
I would suggest sending out the list on email and have us sort of number from 1 to 10 or whatever our choices.
Okay. How about I'll build a survey. Can that work if I send out a survey via email and then you just follow the survey and then you select which ones you would like most? Would that work for you, Dave? Okay. I'll do that then after the meeting. Let me just write down this to myself. All right, I'll do that. Expect that tonight or tomorrow. And then once we get the results from that, I'll send it out to you guys and we'll just have a general concept of where the commission's interests lie for the next year. And then we can proceed with actually introducing those various plans and proposals at our next meeting in March. If that makes sense to everybody. Excellent. Anything further on the bucket list planning meeting for this year? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item of new business, which is the Herald Times Green Space column. I sent out a green space column to all the members a week ago. So the new members, unfortunately, haven't had a chance to read it. It's a column just focusing on the need for green space in Bloomington. One of the common themes we've seen through our work with the Plan Commission is there is a tension between impervious surface and green space. How much impervious surface do you allow? How much landscaping do you require? And how does green space actually impact our goals for climate change mitigation, our goals for recreation and aesthetics, and our goals for human health? So I sent that out. I incorporated all the amendments and changes I got from the current commissioners. Does anyone have any further amendments to offer on that column at this point in time?
I would suggest, Andrew, that you send it out again so our new people can weigh in.
Okay, I can do that. That's fine. Okay, so we'll move on past that. I'll send that out to everyone again. We'll move on to the connectivity plan brochure and pledge, which we agreed at the beginning of the meeting we would not do this month. We'll do that next month. So everyone has a chance to keep their eyes on that again. And we can also send that to our new members, Ben, to make sure they have that as well. So seeing no new business, we'll move on to commissioner announcements. Do any commissioners have any announcements they wish to share with the group this month? Dave?
I always have something. My driveway is full of snow. I didn't feel like shoveling it. I couldn't get my snowblower going. I tried several times to do that. So I'll have to get it going again next summer and hope that it'll work next winter if needed. But that made me get out my snowshoes, and I walked up and down the driveway to make a path for both us to use and for the milkman to use today, and it seems to have been successful. We did get our milk.
Any further announcements from commissioners?
Not too many people around here have snowshoes.
I actually bought those in Australia, I think, to walk over to a pond which was frozen, and I was with a geographer who wanted to cut a hole in the ice and then take a sample out of the sediments at the bottom. And I don't know if I've told this story before. We camped out in a tent the night before on the snow, and right in front of us, between us and the pond, there was a little stream about, maybe 3 feet wide. And I woke up in the morning and I heard a funny sound that sounded like somebody clanking a spoon around in a glass. And it turned out to be a platypus swimming along, wiggling its tail and breaking the ice as it used its front end to feed on the bottom. And so it was breaking the ice, and that was what the sound was. So it was pretty neat to see that platypus. Anyway, I think that's when I bought the snowshoes. They were made in America, but I can't imagine whenever else I would have used them. So.
Any further announcements from commissioners besides that very interesting anecdote from Dave?
I'll do a quick one. You've probably seen the proposed wetland legislation to eliminate state wetland laws. Quick background on that: the federal government used to regulate all wetlands, but as a result of a couple of Supreme Court decisions, a lot of them got eliminated from federal jurisdiction. Indiana passed their own law to regulate those, and from what I've seen, this would considerably reduce the number of wetlands that would be regulated by anybody. So I'd encourage everybody to contact the legislature objecting to this proposal.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mike. I'm sorry. Any further announcements from commissioners? Seeing none and no business further on the agenda, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, there's no vote needed for adjournment. Thank you all and have a great evening. We are adjourned.
Nice to meet you
Good
guys.
night.
Thanks, everybody. Welcome new
All right.
people.
Nice to meet you.